Okay. All right, welcome aboard to Thursday Thoughts here with SCAMLE. A couple of things before we get started. I'll introduce myself in just a second, but I just want to remind everyone watching this recording that these Thursday Thoughts sessions are sponsored exclusively by SCAMLE. Please know that your membership buys you access to lots of fun content. So not only Thursday Thoughts, but also our webinar that is exclusive to us. And we feature lots of really interesting people and lots of interesting voices. So that's coming up. And don't forget, conference registration for March is currently open. So conference registration is currently open, and we are accepting applications for presenters as well. So if that is something that you're interested in, please consider putting in your application today or soonish at the soonest. All right, so tonight, like I said, I was going to introduce myself here. My name is Sarah, and I serve as the Professional Learning Director for SCAMLE. And just like you, I have lots of hats, right? I am an instructional coach, teacher, mom, sister, daughter. I do all the things. And so just like you, sometimes it's really hard to pump the brakes and slow down and just really think about all of the different magic that we are involved in and we're involved with on a daily basis. What we do in the classroom and how we serve our students and how we serve our colleagues and how we serve our communities can't be understated. So I'm excited that you're watching and that you're here with me tonight. Now, Dr. McDonald, he is the current executive director for the organization. Normally he jumps on in later on if because he's working. He works 24/7. Y'all know Dr. McDonald. And so he'll usually jump on the call in a little bit. So today's work is an exercise in reflection and thinking. So we cover a considerable amount of ground during these Thursday Thoughts webinars. And honestly, after a long day of work, it's a lot. My brain is tired. I know your brain is tired. And so I'm just really excited that you're taking the time to just sit, reflect, and think about the science, no pun intended, of what we do in the classroom. So your job tonight is to think and reflect deeply. So tonight's topic for discussion is science best practice. Now, what the heck is that? Well, we're going to talk all about sort of the current best practices, what has been working, what the research tells us is effective in the science discipline in science classrooms at the middle level. I wanted to share with you, and I'll drop this in the chat as well, but I wanted to share with you, this is one of the little goodies that's in that Google folder that you'll have access to. So this is something that we've instituted at our school, at my specific school this school year. And in an effort to sort of monitor quality across all of the science classrooms, what we've tried to do is standardize some just general standard practices that we can all agree on as being effective in a science classroom. So the first thing that we're talking about, that we've been talking through, is this idea of phenomenon-based learning. That is blowing some people's minds right now because we weren't trained on how to do that in school. The vast majority of us were trained that we teach a concept, the kids take notes on it, and the kids study said notes, and then we deliver a test. And then we move on to something else. That is how we were taught, unfortunately, in school. But guess what? We know better now, so we can do better. And so phenomenon-based learning is exquisite because it forces the students to look at science concepts that are very complex from different angles, which is really important. That builds critical thinking skills. Also, it forces us as the professionals to find and seek connection between difficult concepts, which is important for learning and is important to enhance your instruction. That's very, very important. Textbooks I know vary across the state. However, the textbook, and basically the only thing here I put in the framework is my language here is purposefully vague because I want to make sure that we all understand that textbooks are a valuable resource, but they are not the only resource. Science is all around us. And guess what? You have the internet at your fingertips. You have exceptional resources through a variety of places at your fingertips. It is very short-sighted to think that one textbook is going to be the magic thing that cures everything. Definitely won't be. So you're in charge, be the teacher, right? Lab experiences are key. The kids have got to monkey with the science. They have to get their hands dirty. They have to get involved with the science. It's really important that lab experiences are a part of your, like maybe not certainly every day, but are a part of your science experience in your science lab. We're going to talk about lesson planning formats in just a second, but collaboration, that's really important. It's really, really important. And there is a time and place, by the way, and I understand, for the kind of collaboration that says, I need you to turn to your table partner and share with them what you think about concept X. There's a time and a place for that, but there's also a time and a place for making sure that we teach student scientists how to communicate with one another about their learning, because that's how we're going to get to really making sense of these really difficult concepts and really figuring out how we ourselves can connect with these deeply, very complex, some of them, science concepts. All right, talking lesson plan format, and I'm so excited who I have on the webinar tonight, because you're gonna love this content. But the lesson plan format we use at my school is a 4-part lesson plan format. The first part of the lesson is the launch. We have to provide an interesting launch to engage our learners. The second thing we have to do is we have to acknowledge the fact that our mini lesson should not extend past 15 minutes. The research says we have about 12 or 13. I'm being generous with 15, y'all. All right, the third section is we know that students have to collaborate, and they have to be involved in some exploration, some inquiry, in order to acquire new knowledge and skills. That's just how learning works. So if you hand it over on a menu and say, here are the 5 things I was supposed to talk about today, I'm just going to make a photocopy of the notes, or worse, I want you to copy them, and then I want you to study them, guess what? We know better, so we can do better. So we have to be sure that we allow students an opportunity to collaborate, and we teach them how to have a conversation about the contents in the discipline. And then finally, the most unsung hero, the biggest unsung hero in instruction, are summarizers. Summary is one of the most important elements of an effective lesson. If you are closing up your lesson because the bell rang and it's time to go, you're doing it wrong. You have got to be sure that you back up that clock, and I don't care how you do it, set the timer on your phone, make sure, put a student in charge of watching the clock. Doesn't matter how you do it, but always be sure that you incorporate a reasonable summarizer in there that's going to tie up that learning neatly, so that when you revisit tomorrow, you'll have an opportunity to sort of go back to the spot where you left off, rather than having to start over again. So very important that we honor our unsung hero in the summary for every single day, every single class. We have to make that commitment if we want to go ahead and we want to try to raise that student achievement. Now, that document, along with this document, can both be found in the awesome folder that I'm going to drop into the chat here in just a moment. But really, this lesson plan format, it provides a scaffold for the professional to get to the more complex, complicated unit planning that really effective science education requires. It really is the stepping stone to that. So tonight, I'm so excited to welcome the one, the only, Richard Phillips Jr. from Sumter County. He is going to join us tonight, and welcome, sir. We're so happy you're here with us.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to be with you. I agree with you 100% in the intro there. So we have Coach Goodman. Welcome, Coach Goodman. Glad you could join us. And I know there are a lot of you who have probably doing what I myself have done, which is to register and sign up for a webinar, and hopefully get the recording later so you can watch it in your leisure as you may. And we know from COVID that we have to do that. And sometimes you just have too much on your plate, and you can't quite take care of everything on the plate. There he is. There's Coach. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining. Be careful on that road there.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Adrian. How are you, friend?
Hey, I'm in Greenville. And
oh, be quiet. No way.
All right.
Awesome. That's great news. All right. Yes, sir. So first of all, Mr. Phillips, can you just introduce yourself and just let people know where you're from and all the good stuff about you.
Well, I'll try to find as much good stuff as I can. My name is Richard Phillips. I am the Sumter School District Coordinator for K-12 Science, Social Studies, Fine Arts, PE, and Health. So I completely identify with the wearing many hats because I do that. I'm a passionate, lifelong learner. I was a 2014 American Physiological Society Fellow, 2019 Air Force Association South Carolina Teacher of the Year. What all that means is I have been blessed with the ability to teach many very brilliant children. And our children make us look good. Many times when we think we're not getting the job done. So we continue to see that. So very happy to be here and to share with you some information that really exists outside of the silos that we tend to live in and operate in. Let's see, I think sorry, you seeing the screen? Okay, Sarah?
Yes, looking great. So if you just want to go ahead and click, yeah, there we
go. All right.
That's
okay.
awesome.
So yeah, we're more of we segued over to Google Meet from Zoom back just prior to COVID. So it's I'm kind of getting used to this all over.
I know we haven't used Zoom in a while. Absolutely.
Right. So that's my information. One of the best resources we have and one of the most often overlooked resources that we have is each other. We don't tend to reach out and utilize that very valuable resource as much as we should because we're just trapped in our silos, trying to get the job done day in and day out. So have the opportunity to be in Sumter and speak to you across the lines of the state and get outside the silo is it's a great opportunity. So very much appreciate this opportunity. I promise you this will not be a death by PowerPoint. This is more of a conversational type presentation. So I'm hoping to draw in your ideas and your information as well. And I typically do this in a PD. I like to do a little SEL component right up front. Always did that with my kids. I do it with adults as well. So on this squirrel scale, how do you feel today? What is your number? And if you have the ability to drop it in the chat, you may do that. Or if you're looking at this later, then you're doing this solo and you might get a chuckle. So I
don't
think
know. I'm feeling kind of sassy tonight. I got to tell you, like I'm feeling kind of one. I really am. I'm feeling kind of one.
Okay. All right.
I love it. Those are precious.
Very good. I'm down around 8.
Oh, good.
I'm kind of different. I gain speed as the day goes. So, this morning at 5:30 a.m., I was probably a 5, but I've made my way to 8 now. So I've been looking forward to this session.
I love it. Adrian says he's at a 4. Yeah, that's so Adrian, by the way.
Okay. All right. Got his mask on. All right.
I love it. That's priceless.
And then just some classroom norms. I'm not going to read them to you. As I said, this will not be death by PowerPoint. Pretty much just common sense things. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Be gracious and share your time, but fully participate. And let's try to turn the world off for just a few minutes and focus with the laser-like focus on this information. All right. So I have some go-tos. There's certain things that no matter what year I'm in, and for me, this is year 16 in education, I have certain go-tos. One that I find myself rewatching every year is the TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. This was back around 2006. And he pretty much shocked the world with this question: do schools kill creativity? And this TED Talk is, as most of them, it's about 18 minutes, 19 minutes. And the point that he's making is that we have to identify with the concept that there are different people in the classroom, that we have to get away from the cookie cutter approach. We have to include the student more. It can't be just top down. It can't just be teacher centered, teacher driven all the time. We have to move away from that. Then he came back in 2010 and did another TED talk. And I think this one was viewed by about 10 million people. And he elaborated a little further. And he said, do we have to move past the fast food model of education and emphasize personalized learning? And we hear that a lot in South Carolina these days. We hear a lot of talk about personalized learning. And we can go on the state website and look in the content areas, and just about in every one of those, you'll find some information on personalized learning. So he says if we do that, we're going to feed the students' passions and transform education. And he's very adamant about stressing the fact that we need to transform education. So those are good talks for you to take in your space when you have the moment to really focus on it. It's very light. He's a very engaging and funny guy, so you'll enjoy it greatly. Oh, I think I just started it. Don't want to do that. No, don't want to do that either. All right, so there we go. All right, so if we're looking at the framework, and for the framework, I'm referring to the NRC K-12 science framework. So if we look at the framework and we ask the question, what is required to support standards implementation? Because that's what we're being asked to do in this state. This is the bridge year for the 2021 South Carolina College and Career Ready Science Standards. So what is required for us to fully implement this with fidelity? So right up top, number one is good instructional materials. Now notice that's in plural. That's not instructional material. So Sarah, to your point, it's not a textbook. There are a lot of materials here around that. Now, you know, the old style way that this was taught when I was coming up, because, you know, I'm the dinosaur here. Kids in what we call cemetery rows, sitting in the desk, looking forward, listening to the teacher, everything out of a book. So when I went to school, I carried 7 textbooks under my arm. And, you know, hardcover, they're probably the same textbooks my parents had. And that's how we learned. And what we learned was contained within those covers. And that's all we had. You know, if you were very fortunate and you and your family had the means, you had an encyclopedia. And that was it. That is all you had. But now we know we can surround students with many, many instructional materials, and we can be intentional about it. And we can match them with the materials that are going to meet their learning style, and match their learning style. So if they're verbal, auditory, we know we can give them some song. If they're verbal auditory, we know we can give them some music and they can learn from that. So we can do the science rap songs. Just an example, if they're kinesthetic, we know we're going to put some things in their hands and they're going to make sense of science by manipulating some objects. So that's very important to start with that information, that the instructional materials are not, that's not singular, that's plural. Next, we need teachers and leaders to engage in coherent, sustained, focused PD. So we don't, and that sometimes has a negative connotation among teachers. When you say PD, you know, some teachers, oh no, not more PD. So because there's good PD, there's in between, and there's bad. I mean, let's face it, there's bad PD. So not doing PD just to check a box and say we did PD because the calendar says we have to do PD on this day, but coherent PD focused on practice, focused on becoming better, focused on giving a lift to the areas that need to lift. And then again, going back to that number one resource, each other, drawing on the successes of each other, learning from the failures of each other, and incorporating that into the PD. And then lastly, we need to make sure that our vision, so our vision for implementation of the standards is fully aligned with the vision of the state and the vision of the school district and the vision of the building leadership team. This all should be aligned together. And so you would have the full support from the top down and from the bottom up to make this implementation happen. All right. So any thoughts on that so far, Sarah or Coach?
You know, I think it's interesting. If you'll go back real quick to that last slide,
Mhm.
you know, I know that some teachers are having some difficulty, especially my 6th grade teachers with, and ones that I talked to at the 6th grade level, you know, the 7th and 8th grade teachers have I hate to use this word because I mean, I don't know, but they have the luxury of, you know, of slower, you know, transitioning into the new standards. And they all accept that they're all science teachers. Maybe it's been a while since they taught energy, but nevertheless, they remember. And the 6th grade teachers I talked to are just having some difficulty sort of bringing that unification to the vision, the alignment to the vision, because they're facing down a test which is addressing old quote unquote standards, but they're in a bridge year, so they're expected to make change and move forward. And I wonder how do you advise people to reconcile those, you know, it seems to be competing requests.
Right. Well, we have to make sure that we're doing the same thing with our teachers that we say we're going to do with our students, and that is meet them where they are. So what is their capacity? What is their capacity this year? What is their capacity in terms of implementing new standards? If you look at an implementation model, if you go back to design and engineering and look at implementation models, and you look at the research, you'll see that anytime you're implementing something new, anywhere from 5 to 10% of the people who are in the cohort that's receiving the implementation, 5 to 10% of them are just going to run with it. They're going to grab it. They're going to go with it. They're going to make it do everything it needs to do. They're going to, you know, hit every nut and bolt and put it all together and determine how it works. On the other end of that scale, anywhere from 5 to 7% of them are never going to do it. They're never going to, no matter what you do, they're never going to do it. You can go in and do a song and dance and be engaging as much as anyone in human history, but they're never going to do it. Oh, they'll tell you they're going to do it and they'll say the right things and they'll nod and they'll accept the instruction, but not going to happen. I'm going to resist change. I'm going to do it my way. There's nothing wrong with my way. The state, they don't know. I know how to get results. I'm going to do it my way. So that's anywhere from 5 to 7%. Everyone else is in the middle. They're in wait and see mode. They're waiting to see which cohort is going to win the day, the naysayers or the hardwired hard chargers. Who's going to make it work? Who are we going to hear from? Who's going to make the case, and which way are we going to fall? So I think we have to make sure that we understand that dynamic as we work with teachers to implement this. And it's not going to be on the timetable that ideally we want it to happen, which is yesterday. You know, so it's a work in progress, but we have to give the teachers the same grace we give the students. So just very quickly, the 3 dimensions of teaching and learning as it applies to the new 2021 standards. So for the first time, the DCIs, the disciplinary core ideas, the science and engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts are all combined into one performance expectation. Prior to the new standard rollout, these were all separate performance expectations. These were all separate components. And it was very difficult for teachers to operate. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a good many teachers had difficulty with this because you had to pull all this together. You had to pull in the DCI, the SCP, and the cross-cutting curriculum pieces, cross-cutting concepts, the CCCs. You had to pull all them together into your plan and put them together yourself. So what a lot of what we see that happened in a lot of classrooms is science and engineering practices were not always taught. Cross-cutting concepts, they were taught even less than science and engineering practices. And everybody was living in the disciplinary core idea world. That was your money. That was your money maker. That's where you went to. You taught DCIs every day. That's what you called covering your curriculum. So that's where the majority of folks live, because, you know, my kids in 6th grade have to know what atmosphere is, and they have to get that right up front in Unit 1 in weather. So that's where you live. Now, the reason this is a heavy shift and a big shift is this is all combined into one performance expectation. The upside to it is that you can no longer omit science and engineering practices. You can no longer omit cross-cutting concepts like systems and cause and effect. You now, if you're teaching the performance expectation, they're getting all 3 components in the lesson and the activity. And so science and engineering practices, the way to understand that is that's the actual doing. That's what you're doing with science. That's the actual practice of a scientist or an engineer. Cross-cutting concepts, those are the pieces that transfer very easily from grade level to grade level. Cause and effect and systems. They even apply to other content areas. So when you talk about integrating at the elementary level, when we talk about integrating our science and our sub-studies with our math and our ELA, the pathway is the cross-cutting concepts, because we find that they are more easily linked to the other content areas and not quite as disciplinary core specific. So the instructional design, Sarah, you covered a lot of this at the beginning as far as the way the design is. And we've already talked about learning material, but you really centered on learning experiences. That came throughout your presentation at the beginning. And it has to be exactly that, folks. It has to be an experience. That's the key, experience. You see learning experiences, and they're properly sequenced. Learning experiences designed to integrate the concepts. Just what we said, it's all combined into one performance expectations. And then the part I'm going to get into a little more fully here, students have opportunities for ongoing reflection, discussion, discourse, and argumentation. So as Sarah presented earlier, if you are standing in front of the room and you're going past 15 minutes, more than likely, nothing from number 4 is taking place in your classroom. Kids aren't doing any of that. You're still living in the DCI world and pushing that curriculum out. So then we get into more discussion of the shift. So the adoption of 3-dimensional science, and I just showed you the 3 dimensions, all combined into one performance expectation at a time. So this requires shifts. And according to the NSTA, another way to look at these shifts is to describe them as opportunities for sense making. And the reason I wanted to present that today is because I think this is a somewhat overlooked part of the new standard implementation model. And I think it's a part where we really need to be intentional, and we need to understand the importance of it in as far as the learning transfer and progressions. So I've prepared a little quiz for you. What is your current understanding of sense making? So when you hear that, what do you think of? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting you asked this question, at least for me, because when I think of sense making, I immediately go to communication. I want you to be able to explain to me what it is that you understand about a given concept. But one of the things that we're seeing in the data from in my specific situation is that the students struggle to write articulately. And so in an effort to support that move toward a stronger writing capability and competency, some of my science teachers are like, well, I really want to go after this sense making, this idea of like the kids communicating what they know about the discipline in short bursts of writing, which I think is great too, because I think that we can use writing as the vehicle to learning without teaching kids how to write. There's other people in the building who do that, and they're awesome at it. But we can definitely provide opportunities for students to communicate with us in a written way and use writing to learn as the vehicle. So to me, that's what I think of when I think of sense making.
Okay, very good. So communicating in different ways, different means. So so if we were to ask a cohort of teachers what this looks like, and what would this look like in a classroom, we would know fairly quickly whether they are the stand at the room, deliver instruction type of teacher, or they're the engage and students and student-driven instruction type of teacher, because we could tell that from the responses. So that leads to this one. So based on that, and this also is telling. So we'll find that if you don't have a full understanding of what sense making is on this continuum of science instruction, you'll find yourself on the left side more often than not. You're going to be focused on disseminating information. The students are going to be focused on knowing what you disseminate. And, that's where I talk, you write, you learn, I test, you demonstrate what you know. That's the old, that's been around forever. That's the way I was required to learn. But now if we go to the other side of the continuum, the sense-making frame. So now you're developing conceptual understanding, giving them the opportunity to develop an understanding. Their whole focus is on understanding the information, not mimicking what you give them, not mimicking what they're hearing, not mimicking your questions and your answers. This is 100% from the students. And again, they have to have the opportunity to make sense of something, whether it be a problem or be based on observation. Assessments are focused on use of evidence. So getting more into performance assessments, looking at watching them do it, listening to them in groups, and assessing their knowledge based on their sense making and their reactions to manipulating the information. In other words, figuring things out. So this was very interesting when I first found this project. So Professor Mitra, and I may be saying that incorrectly, but I watched this many times. He never calls his own name. So I think it's Professor Mitra. But he decided to do a project. So he had an office in a very poor, depressed area of India. So he wanted to do a scientific study. So he cut a hole in the wall of his office and he put a computer monitor in the hole in the wall so that it would face outward from the building. And so the kids could interact with the computer. That's all he did. He just put the computer out there. And then the next day, when he came back, there was a child interacting with the computer. This child had never seen one, never been taught anything about a computer. So he replicated this. He said, well, that's interesting, but what would happen if I replicate this in other areas? So he went to another very poor area and put a computer monitor into the wall, and it gave him access to the mouse and everything, and left. And so then he came back, and by the evening of that day, 70 children were all browsing. Now, this is a very poor area in India. They'd never seen a computer, didn't know what it was, nothing. 8 minutes, an embedded computer seemed to be all that they needed. So as time went on, and he went to another area where they didn't understand English, where the inhabitants did not speak English. So he thought, well, maybe this other group had an advantage because they spoke English. So he went to an area where he knew they didn't speak English. And everything, all the computer language was in English. So then when he checked back, he noticed that there was a cohort of students there, and they were browsing and they were playing games on the computer. And so he asked them, so how are you doing this? And then they said, there's the quote, well, you left this machine which talks only in English, so we had to learn English. It's very interesting. And so they learned words like exit, stop, find, save, computer language type words. So he found that just by giving the kids opportunity to make sense of it, they figured it out on a certain level. And students started teaching, the children started teaching each other. He said he observed a young girl calling like 5 other children over and showing them, this is how you do this and this is how you get here. It's very amazing. So if you have time, it's a very good TED talk to look at there. Well, there we go. All right, so I'm not playing the videos on purpose. So if we transition that to today, and we look in a classroom.
I'm gonna jump in here because I want to emphasize a point that I think is so important.
Okay.
We see all the time, I hear all the time teachers say, my kids can't do. My kids can't do because they have an IEP. My kids can't do because they have a 504. My kids can't do because they come from poverty. My kids can't do because they can't speak English. I think that they can.
I've never been that person, but I didn't go to college to be a teacher. I worked in the science community. I was working in the laboratory, and we were engaged in nanotechnology. I went down to Louisiana to teach after Katrina a couple of years after, in 2007, because I came home from work and I saw a news story about how the New Orleans area lost 3,000 teachers who never came back. So it just spoke to me. I thought, I've got to go there. So, and I have a very supportive family, and they said, you go, we go. So with no teaching experience at all. So I put my resume online, and within 90 minutes, and I tell people it's no exaggeration, within 90 minutes, the phone was ringing offering me a job teaching chemistry. And I went, and what brings that up is the area where I started was the poorest area in the entire state. And when I taught, the first thing I did was I put them in groups, in collaborative groups. And whenever they would ask me a question, I would ask them a question back. And so I remember one time a young lady said, Mr. Phillips, can't you just give us the answer? And I, so I just joked. I said, no, wait a minute. I'm trying to understand this. I know I'm new at this, but you want me to give you the question and you want me to give you the answer. So what is your role? And she said, but I'm going to college. I'm going to be an art major. So that spoke to me, and it said, well, the way through to her is through art. So I need to teach chemistry by leaning into art. So we started, getting into discussions about geometric shapes and microscopy and things like that. Many years later, I received an email from her. Hey, Mr. Phillips, I went to college, but you're never going to guess what I majored in. And I'm thinking art. She says, I'm going to be a forensic chemist. So if I had listened to her, even the student saying, I can't do it this way, I can't do this. And then colleagues all over that campus told me, you can't teach that way. You can't, our kids can't learn. We can't put them in groups. No, we can't. They won't behave. You can't teach them that way. But I did. And the vast majority of them passed the state test in chemistry. And this is a very poor, depressed area where kids truly were homeless. So I automatically dismissed my kids can't. But now in my position, I asked if a teacher was to tell me that, and very, very rarely do I hear it. If a teacher were to tell me that, my answer would be, show me the data that supports your argument they can't, because then you show me how you tried to do it instead of just not doing it and jumping to the conclusion. What children can do and at different levels, this is elementary, but you'll see in the video, how they make sense of kidney beans, and they're learning a new word, which is germinate. So they learn the word by engaging with each other and by engaging with kidney beans. And so they're not learning the word by rote, a skill and drill kind of memory technique. They're actually having an experience with kidney beans that germinate. It's a big difference there. So you get to see the teacher-student interaction there, which is very important. So that's more questions for when you watch the video. All right, so if we go back to where we started, sense making, what is sense making? Well, and Sarah, you talked about some of this as well at the outset. So engaging prior ideas, targeting phenomenon, making it relevant by using phenomenon. I can give you a good example here. So if you're looking at 6th grade science, unit 1, most often in this state is weather. Old standards, 2014 standards, unit 1 will be weather. So right after you finish all the beginning of year stuff and you get into the curriculum, if you're looking at the sequence of the standards as they're laid out, you would begin with what is atmosphere. So I asked teachers, put on your student hat. You're the student sitting in my classroom. I walk in, I say, okay, class, today we're going to learn what is atmosphere. Are you excited? Are you engaged? Will that get you out of the bed tomorrow morning? Will that make you run to my classroom just wanting to know more about atmosphere? No, it's not going to do any of those things. I'm going to see kids looking at me with the glassy-eyed look like, okay, nothing's going on here. That's what I'm going to receive back. So I never taught it that way. I always started off with, how do you prepare for hurricanes, and how do you know when you're going to be affected by a hurricane? And then I would show them a clip of Hurricane Florence from 2018, which was phenomenal in and of itself because it was named Hurricane Florence and it passed right over the city of Florence on its way to North Carolina, and it stalled for about 3 days and deposited somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 inches of rain. So now if I show them that news clip, now they're engaged. And so now I'm giving them, so that's a phenomenon. Now, not all of these are going to be as, great, not going to be what you call phenomenal, but it's a phenomenon. It's something that I want to know more about. Well, I'm intrigued now. How did this hurricane, really, if I think about if I'm a middle school kid, what is a hurricane? How do I know? And I say to them, you can track the hurricane yourself. You can learn to track a hurricane. You can know 2 weeks in advance about roughly where it's going to go, and you can prepare your family for it. And wouldn't it be great if you could do those things? So then what I do with the rest of the unit is we start deconstructing the hurricane. So we go all the way back. So what causes a hurricane? So when we get into heat and energy and convection and all that, and we work our way backward, and guess where we end up? What is an atmosphere? Because all that takes place in the atmosphere. And they come along with the ride because I give them different investigative phenomenon type questions throughout. But I put them in groups. They work on it. They make sense of it. It doesn't come from me. I never spent more than 10 minutes in the front of the room, 12, like you said, at the most. And that's just to set it up and let them loose. Given them the opportunity to have an experience with it, have them make claims. Even if the claims are incorrect, we're going to expect them to be incorrect. Because think about it, they have a prior knowledge they're coming into the room with. Now they're going to learn new information. Well, at what time do they reconcile those two? If the new information is different from the prior knowledge, how do they make sense? Which one is going to dominate their thinking from this point forward? They have to have the opportunity to talk about that. And it goes back to your accountable talk piece. They have to talk with their peers. They have to make sense. They have to justified in their mind. And by doing all this, they're using the academic terms and vocabulary, just as the kids in the prior video were using the word germinate. All right, so phenomenon. So instruction has to be phenomenon-based, student-centered, student-driven. If you look in that NRC framework, the word phenomenon in all its various forms appears in the framework somewhere in the neighborhood of 194 times. So how important is phenomenon to teaching the new standards? It's essential. The heavy lift is that we no longer have the pacing guide, curriculum guide, cookie cutter format that says you have to do it this way. We're all going to teach what is atmosphere. Now you have the autonomy to bundle the standards. Take standards from life science, take standards from earth science, bundle them together. You don't have to teach all the life science standards together and ignore earth science. Bring them together. Bring the physical science together. Bring all the standards together. Bundle them in a way that will be relevant and engaging for your kids, because what's engaging to the kids in Greenville may not be what's engaging to the kids in Sumter. But now as a teacher, I have the autonomy to create a story and to have the phenomenon be the central piece of that story, and to bundle the standards to match that, so that as they go along the journey on this storyline, they're actually learning all the components of all the different performance expectations. And I know that's a lot very quickly. So we have to flip the previous experience upside down. So scientists and teachers disseminating information, reaching some of the students who retain it at a very low degree. We can see this in the state testing scores. We know this hasn't been effective. So now it's the other way around. Students making sense of the phenomenon. Teacher is the guide on the side. The teacher is listening, going to the different groups, or going and just a couple of peers working together, listening. What are they saying? Giving them follow-up questions, and being okay with the fact that this group took the investigation in one direction, but this group took it in another direction, because we're going to come together at the end and put all this together and make sense of the entire totality of information. All right, so I know we're getting late on time. So I have put into the presentation from the NGSS 5 tools and processes. There's a nice video that sets it up. You have the 5 tools here as far as how to implement the new standards and what direction to go in. So for people who need a bit of structure, this is very good. Talks about using, nothing really new here, using backward planning, backward design. We know how to do that, but we have to change that design a little bit because we have to work in this 3D storyline about phenomena. That's the difference right there. And then sequencing those lessons to fit that narrative from that storyline. And then at the end, recognizing that assessment doesn't just have to be paper, pencil, old style, on the computer, multiple choice. We can have performance assessments. We can watch them do it and be okay with that as an assessment. So then you have this little guide here, just walks you through the 5 steps there. So going forward, we need to increase our understanding of phenomena-focused 3-dimensional teaching and learning. That's what we're going to have to learn as we go. We're going to figure this out together. We're going to learn from each other's successes and failures, and we're going to develop best practices around that. Develop understanding of opportunities and challenges in implementing the phenomena. Luckily, a lot of people have done a great deal of work on this for us. And I've put into the folder a document, a very robust document with a lot of links. Some of my favorites are in there. There are folks in there who actually crafted the standards, who are leading you through how to do a lot of this. There's a lot of links there. Paul Anderson, who used to do Bozeman Science, is doing great work with this. His site is there. Awesome Science Teaching is a book I recommend. It's a very relevant book, even though the standards change. There's a link in there for a lot of what they do. So some very good resources for you. And when we need to promote awareness of the teaching and learning as far as integrating the math and the ELA, so we're going to have to close the learning gaps that the research says exist. We're going to have to look to that integration model. That integration model is really going to have to happen in elementary. A national survey was done and it went out just to teachers. And they asked elementary teachers, how much time do you allocate to science? And yeah, I see you, Sarah, I see you. So on the low end, on the high end, it was 18 minutes a day, science instruction in an elementary classroom. On the low end, it was 18 minutes a week. That's an Ed Puzzle video on Friday. I mean, it is. That's what it is. That is, folks, that's not science education. It's not going to get us where we have to be. That's not giving them the prerequisite knowledge they need when they get to 6th grade and have to start working in the middle school landscape. It's not going to get it done. So we're going to have to integrate. And the reason it's that way is because elementary teachers are so pressed, so hard pressed and hardwired to do the ELA and the math, because ELA was on average 90 minutes a day. Math was 60. Poor social studies, 9 minutes, half of what science was getting. That was a survey that went out to teachers, not administrators. So we're going to have to look to that integration model for elementary. And when I talk to publishers, I ask them specifically to start taking a look at that to help us out, to put together some integration models for us, as they're crafting their new textbooks. All right, so now it's just up to you. What do you do next? Drill down, investigate, get outside your comfort zone, do it a different way, try it with the knowledge that, yes, you're going to fail in places. But again, this is our bridge year. So let's figure it out this year and go into next year with a more solid plan as to what does and does not work. So in our district, we're piloting a couple of different things. I'm a real big fan of OpenSciEd. It's open source. It's free. It's free. I mean, middle school is done for you. Every lesson, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, every lesson's already done. Every lesson, every PowerPoint, every video clip, everything is already there. It's almost scripted. So if you want to see, and it's done beautifully, and it's done. And by the way, I'm not getting paid by OpenSciEd. But what I'm asking cohort of teachers do where I am is to pilot it and try it out. And then we'll have another cohort that'll do it a different way and another cohort that's going to do it a different way. And then at the end of the year, let's compare. Let's find out what worked, what didn't work. Let's take all our understandings at the end of the year, put them together, craft a plan for next year, and be okay with it and give ourselves some grace.
Oh
thank you
my
for allowing me
gosh.
to.
Yes, Mr. Phillips. Oh my gosh. Okay, so first of all, let me say thank you. Thank you for all of your time and effort tonight to hanging out with us and sharing some of your thoughts and sharing your point of view on things. As we move into our final moments together tonight, my final thoughts tonight revolve around connection and connectivity. Science is all around us. My science teachers, when I was young, used to tell me that, Sarah, science is all around you. Look around, you can see science all around you, but they could never put actual theory into practice. They would hand me a really heavy textbook and they would say, trust me, science is all around us. But we have an obligation to our students. If we want them to be college and career ready, if we want them to be confident, highly sought after, frankly, critical thinkers in the global market, we have to allow them opportunities to build connection to illuminate the connectivity that exists between all of the disciplines, whether we're thinking science or mathematics or ELA. We can do it all at once. That's how learning happens, because you're going to hit a spark in me, and then the person sitting next to me might be next week. So we have an obligation to make sure that we are giving students opportunities to explore, to inquire, and to have experiences with us where it's safe, where they can ask what somebody someday might say, that's a really dumb question. There are no dumb questions if you're willing to take the risk to ask them. So as we go into the future, whether that be tomorrow back at school, or next week or next month or next year when you start your first year of teaching, just know that it's time to join the community. It's time to join up, and to not only, and then in turn grow our confidence so that we can invite our students to join into the thought community as well. I thank you all very much for your time and attention. Just a couple of thank yous. Again, thank you to SCAMLE for their continued support of these Thursday Thoughts sessions that will run until early November on various topics. We've got next week, we're going to be talking specifically to Kate, STEM, and our related arts folks who work at the middle level. We know that they talk about wearing lots of hats. They wear lots of hats too. And so we're going to have some professional development for them, tightly tailored to their specific needs. I'm very excited about that. Upcoming in the future weeks, we're going to be talking to leadership. And we also have a really amazing ESOL presentation prepared for you as well. So stay tuned to www.scamle.org for all the latest about not only your Thursday Thoughts webinars, but also all the upcoming great stuff that's happening with our conference coming up in March. And remember that conference registration is open, as well as applications for presentations. So please take a risk, get out there, join me, join us, and have some fun in Myrtle Beach come March. Thank you all for your time. Be safe out there. Get back to watching Netflix. That's what you should be doing. All right, be well, and we hope to see you very, very soon.